We are just delighted to have Dave here to share with us today and to hear some of his thoughts on where we're headed as a community, how that's going to impact us in our businesses, and for those of us who live in Edmonds and love it, how it's going to impact us in our personal lives. So Dave, please come and share with us.
My dad and mom obviously came out of the Depression. And they come out of a tough life, and by gum, they find a profession or a job opportunity, and that's what they stayed with for the rest of their life. My dad, when he passed away, had been a painter for 32, 34 years. And one of the marvelous things, and I'm just guessing this by the makeup of the group, is that in today's society, it's okay to move around doing different kinds of things. I characterize my past as a checkered past because I, out of graduate school, went right into Shoreline Community College. I taught there for 11 years. Started when I was the ripe old age of 23 years old as an assistant professor of music. And after that, I just kind of burned out as being a teacher. All the concerts I was doing, the traveling, the summer camps, guest conducting, all of that stuff just kind of wore me down. And I think many people today face that same dilemma. You just kind of burn out at what you maybe started at the beginning and what your profession was. Others stay in forever. Imagine a lot of the lawyers, once you get that doggone piece of paper, you're not going to change for anything. But nonetheless, I went from there to actually selling real estate and bought the company. And that was for about 26 years here in Edmonds. That's how I really became involved in the community. During that time, I ran for city council and served on the council for 12 years. I then ran for county executive, and I lost that race. So, well, what do you do then? Because of the real estate business I sold. So then I turned the next cheek and was appointed, or not appointed, but had a position at a think tank. Yeah, politicians can think too. And from there, went to an appointment from Governor Gregoire as Growth Management Hearings Board, which makes land use decisions all over the state. And then I was recruited to run for mayor. So this is my next job. Anybody has any ideas for after that, just be sure and talk to me about it. Seriously though, I'm really delighted to have the opportunity to speak on the subject matter, which is what makes a successful community. And the reason I say that is on a daily basis, I can see the difference in our community today based upon when I first came to Edmonds many years ago. And it's dramatic, folks. And there's a set of reasons of why we evolve and change. And it's been fascinating for me to go through the exercise over the last few weeks, considering what it is that makes a successful city. And really, my talk today will really focus only on, from the city government point of view, what makes a successful city. The question posed to me, though, is having me think on a broader scale. And I have to tell you, I'll have another talk based upon your challenge to me, thinking from the standpoint of the business community. I was involved in the business community for years. What from the civic, general civic side, what bonds this community? And so it's just been a fascinating exercise for me to go through. And I'm not requesting to be brought back, but I am going to complete what I've been thinking about. I used to frustrate my wife. My wife is an action person. Let's do this, let's do that. When we were first married, I can still remember one specific time when I was sitting in the living room, and I'd been sitting there for quite a while just thinking. And of course, she's running around the house doing this and that, and she probably, I don't know how much longer, later it was, probably a half hour. She came back, "What are you doing?" "I'm thinking." "That's okay, isn't it?" And of course, we got to the point that it was, in fact, okay. At least you let me believe it was okay. I thought I would have the opportunity just to show you in one easy visual what a successful community looks like. Here we are. Can't tell? That's an aerial photo of downtown, well, more than downtown Edmonds. That, folks, is what a successful community looks like. How about those mountains in the background? Just stunning stuff. That's an easy intro to, that's a successful city, folks. So I can either choose to leave now or talk for a while longer. You know, part of this thought process that I went through really led me to a series of words, occasionally a phrase, but what does make a successful city? And remember, this is through the visual, my vision of the city of Edmonds, the government of Edmonds. What do we need to do to be successful as a community? Because it's not just what happens in City Hall, but how can we make the community more inviting and more joyful? So I developed just a series of words, couple of phrases on what I think centers to make a successful community. And we can talk about some of these. If you have any questions as I go through this list, be sure and feel comfortable in asking. The first thing that I did when I became mayor, or while I was trying to become mayor, is think about the first three words there, identifying the assets, the amenities that we have in our community, and where do we have weaknesses? Because we do. I'll give you an easy weakness. How many big box stores, how many shopping malls do you see in Edmonds? None. Zip. Well, in a way, that's a good thing, because we've got this fabulous downtown. But as mayor, and I guess every mayor since George Brackett, is thinking, how in the hell do we generate enough revenue to meet the lifestyle expectations of this community? Because they are high. And I'm glad of that, actually. So a weakness we have is that we don't have some of the easy ways out. For example, sales tax. We've got to be more creative in how we can generate business. And a gentleman at my table who indicated he had been here since 1959. You know, if you were back then, it was almost like wagon trains and buckboards coming through town. I came to the community the first time, I think it was in '67. And we have changed so dramatically. We have done so many things in this community. Some of it forced upon us because we are in a fringe area of change and growth. We know that by 2035, we're going to have another 200,000 people move into Snohomish County with us. We know that the expectation from the Puget Sound Regional Council is that we will have another 5,500 people in town by that time. We know that we should have the expectation of creating another 1,000 jobs in that time. We should also have the expectation of another 1,200 housing units to house those 5,500 people. How are we going to do that? Well, the same thought came up back in 1959. The town's growing, how are we going to change? And you find ways to do that. The words that typically scare people are growth, development, sort of. But if you talk about it in terms of change, and you let people know that 200,000 people are, by the way, going to move into Snohomish County with us, you begin to get that we've got to evolve in some fashion. The trick is, in Edmonds, getting back to my point about weaknesses, we don't have the big box stores to keep driving the economy. We have this great business community. And so the way I'm starting to think about, and we're actually beginning to articulate, is Edmonds is becoming a destination, whether it's a destination for people to consider moving their family to. As importantly, though, the number of people here who come as daytime visitors. How many people are tired of the chaos in Seattle, the chaos in Bellevue, the cars, the people? Where can we go for a day? Just simply to have a small town experience, kind of kick back, wander the streets, go into stores, have lunch, go over to the ECA. Think about the quality of amenities that we have in this community. So I've really gone through that process of trying to identify how and where we're going to address the weaknesses, but at the same time, making good use of what our amenities are. So anyway, that's the first word, or I guess 3 words I have there. Another piece that's very important to me, and I think it should be to anyone who is in charge of the city, is how do you communicate with people? And any of you who are active in the community know that we in the city attempt to communicate on a variety of different levels. We have our city council's meeting actually broadcast live, although I'll never understand why anyone would watch it. Neil can attest that he stopped on the street all the time. I saw the meeting last night, and it's stunning, but somebody has, maybe there's bad programming on Tuesday night. But the communication piece, whether it's the columns that we try to put in the print media and our online My Edmonds News, we try and get our columns in twice a month, and we try and move the ideas and the topics around a bit. We broadcast our city council meetings. I hold quarterly town halls. I try and be open and visible in the community too, which I think is critical. But we really try to do outreach all the time, and I think it's one of the keys in creating this sort of vibrancy and change that's come about in our community, is that we do the best job we can in trying to communicate with the community of what we're about, and try and be, I don't like the word, but as transparent as we possibly can. I have people, when I talk about transparency, say, well, why don't you go on TV and have the Fire District 1 negotiation so everybody can watch it? Huh? You can't be transparent about everything, but the transparent idea to make you aware or give you the opportunity to be aware of what's going on in the community is important. And I think you've got to develop kind of a common messaging. Messaging should be consistent. If a topic comes up, and I know that none of my city council ever make a mistake of talking to somebody and say one thing, and then a couple of days later they bump into someone else and they say something else on the same subject, different from what they told the first person. You've got to be consistent about the messaging that you're trying to deliver, and that goes with almost anyone in this room who's trying to build, maintain, or change in their business. You've got to develop messages and stick with them. I even go to the extreme of a particular thorny subject comes up. I write down 4 or 5 things that I'm going to talk about, and no matter who talks to me about it, that's what I talk to them about. The messaging thing, along with the communication, is a great way to let the community know about the consistency, about where the community is headed. Budgeting, that's kind of a interesting word. We're doing it right now. As I think I mentioned, I submitted my budget the other night, and now the council will jump on it and want to change some things. My only charge to them is we are entering a period of caution because we've now had a string of 8 pretty good years. At least they've all been up since the recession of 2008. Started small, incrementally though, we're growing revenue-wise. My message to them and to the community is most of these cycles tend to run in about 10 years. So we're in the middle, almost at the end of the 8th year. And so my budget next year will be what I call cautious. We're not going to go out and spend all of the revenue that we've generated that's new and above what it was last year or the year before. We had a small amount, $140,000 increase in sales tax at the end of September from the beginning of the year. Now that doesn't sound like much money, except it's $139,000 higher than the record sales tax we had last year, which means the economy is still strong. But when it gets strong, it's going to change. And in fact, I read a Wall Street Journal article this morning projecting that in the next 4 years, we're bound to have some sort of a recession. It's cyclical. We don't need to be afraid of it, and they don't always have to be as deep as it was in 2008. But you've got to think about these things and, in my mind, plan ahead. 2 of the main reasons that we're in business of running a city are the next 2 things. One is public safety, and the other is infrastructure. That's the reason cities were put together. How do you put in the water pipes? What do you do with the sewer system? How do you keep the roads paved? All that sort of thing. That's critical if you want to have what a successful community looks like. One of the things we've done, easy example, is we've spent in excess of $1 million a year in doing a resurfacing of our roads. And they've caused some pretty dramatic change, but the council, this was before Neil was on or I was involved, they didn't do any road resurfacing for 5 years because they were trying to figure out ways to work the way through the recession, which I get, but guess what? You've got to catch up. And that's what we're faced right now. We put in, I don't know how many thousand feet of water line this year. We're working with a wastewater treatment plant all the time. That's one of the great amenities that we need to keep in our community. So when people drive in from the top of the hill and the road's smooth and you can see the view, this is a cool place. And I mean, that's part of the reason that we have been achieving success in our business community, because we are treating it as a destination and we're trying to decorate it, if you will, in appropriate ways through the water system, the sewer system, the roads, all of the infrastructure. And yes, we'll do things that are new and innovative. Next door here, you're going to see, as far as I know, the first ever public restroom in the city of Edmonds. Starbucks, some of the other coffee shops are going to be delighted that we're going to do that. Of course, now there could be the counter argument. And what would it be? They didn't come to my store anymore. They always bought something when they came here. So there's a push-pull on anything you do. But I think that kind of amenity will add to the interest in having this be a destination for people to come to. Because you didn't have to explain if you were a store owner, well, I'm sorry, we don't have one, and no, you can't go in my back room to use the bathroom. So anyway, the infrastructure business is terribly important. One of the things that I take great delight in is that we have a wonderful staff here in the city. Now, many of you don't have reason probably to work with them very often. I know Bill does, or Bob, I'm sorry, God. Bob McChesney does. He's the CEO of the port. We were just having a conversation about some of our staff and how easy they are to work with, how fluent they are in what they want or what we need to do. It's a joy. That's one of the biggest joys of the day for me, is coming in this building and knowing the people that I'm working with. They're quality people. Can we always give you the answer you want? No. Blame the council. Oh, I'm sorry. I forgot you were here. Nonetheless, though, it is a really great staff, and we are thinly staffed. Example, not counting the people I'm going to add 4 new positions next year, but we run right around 215 to 200 staff. We're a town of 41,000. This isn't just quaint little downtown. It's a city, 41,000. We're the 3rd largest city in Snohomish County. A lot of people don't understand that Edmonds is larger, although it's not huge, but it is larger than it appears if you're driving down the hill on the smooth road with the great view. But nonetheless, it's there. Another important, this is, I guess, more personal to me, is the idea of having gathering places. One of the really outstanding, and I'll give you one example, is the community involvement in this city. It's really extraordinary, and I know a few of you are involved in various activities. But it truly is one of the big drawing cards. And where do you gather? Well, stop and think about it. How about the Saturday market when it's available? People are here. It's wonderful. Think about the 4th of July. Think about the various celebrations through the year. Think about the Hazel Miller Park up the street here where Old Milltown is. Wonderful place. Couple of restaurants, other things you can eat, and there's a park-like setting. If you have a chance, go down and look at what's going on here at the restroom area, because there's going to be this kind of half bathroom and half a comfortable place to come and sit. Huge rocks in there, a lot of plantings. It'll be a peaceful, quiet place to be. Think about all of the benches you see as you walk around town. People need places to gather and talk. When I was elected first term, we had an extraordinary turnout, and this, I'm trying to make my point on community involvement. This is a municipal election, so it's not the presidential senators and all that sort of national senators. It's town politics election. We had a 64% turnout for that election. The city of Linwood had, I'm going to be a little off on this, 36%. Everett, 28%. City of Edmonds, 64%. What does that tell you? The community cares about the community. They pay attention to what's going on. Neil and I can tell you they really pay attention because they talk to us. I've already had my ear bent a couple of times here today. But that's okay. That's the reason that the community is as powerful as it is, because it cares about itself. And some of the things we're talking about here is what engenders that sort of activity, that sort of excitement. And I've already mentioned sort of kind of the events that go on. Just all year round, there's something going on in town, and it brings people together. And if they live at one end of the town or the other, they see who they know and they have a conversation. That's one of the reasons, and probably in my mind, one of the main reasons that we are a strong community that truly cares about itself. The last point I wanted to make was the need for us to think not just about what happens inside the city limits, but we're part of the region. And the way that you cause influence regionally, and I'm talking about Pierce, King, Snohomish County, maybe even Kitsap sometimes. The way you cause influence is to become involved at the regional level. That's probably true in many of your business lives. The way you have better contacts, you grow outside of the city. You have business contacts from wherever it is you've been or wherever it is that you spend time. I believe very strongly in regionalism, and that's why I'm a member of the Sound Transit Board, the Community Transit Board, and the Economic Alliance Snohomish County, because I can touch all of those other electeds, hear what the new ideas are in each of those different realms, and it causes influence to me. But more importantly, and this is a message to the City Council too, if we have those 7 people out in the region causing influence, we can be a town of 40,000 in a greater area that has 3 million people. We need to understand who we are, how we communicate, bring people together. It's a fascinating experience, whether you like or dislike Sound Transit 3. To watch that whole thing, and I was an original board member back in 1993, to watch the way that we've grown the region, but we've all got to think that way regionally, because it will become, well, we know that it is an important factor on why people decide to live here or not. For a major corporation to open up here, the transportation issue is critical to major businesses. How are we going to get people from Y to Z or back to X? And that's a consideration that we need to consider. And I'm not here to pump Sound Transit 3, but it is an element of what makes this region successful. And we need to stay focused on that. Now, I talked about the pieces of what I think makes a successful city, only through the eyes, though, of the city, because my list is not quite as long, but it started in the other 2 areas that I mentioned: the business community, the civic community, the community at large. Get those lists going. You're going to find many of the similarities that I've got on this list, but nonetheless, there is a different perspective. Just one example. How many of you are familiar with a group called Edmonds Moms? Edmonds Moms is a pretty low profile group of people who just communicate back and forth. Meaningful issues. They don't take political positions, none of that. It's really information. Where can I find a good foot doctor? What can I, where's a good dentist? Their membership, by the way, is 4,600. That's a group that can cause influence. If they all got mad at you. But nonetheless, that's really the other piece that I'm trying to look at. Now, I've talked about all the pieces. I just want to put up 3 more things that will give you an indication about the way I feel about the community, but it adds to why and how I think the community is as successful as it is. If you're going to hold an office, you have to know the purpose. What is the purpose that you're doing what you're doing? And it really goes down to the 3rd point, which is my sort of new mantra: leave it better than when you arrived. That should have been, and probably was, the mission of every mayor that ever was in office here. They want to leave it better than when they got here. And when I can point to Five Corners Roundabout, the purchase of Civic Field, the restroom, we're making the city better than it was when I got here. And then the other thing is you have to have some sort of a passion about it too. And how many politicians have you run into that are in the middle of their 4th or 5th term and the passion's gone? I'm lucky enough to still carry around what I call passion. Thanks very much for having me here today. Can I take any questions if anyone has questions at all? Yeah.
I have at least one. You're probably aware that there are some in Linwood that are a little bit envious of the ambience in Edmonds, and there have been some in the Linwood Chamber of Commerce that have proposed the idea of combining Linwood Edmonds into one entity, to give Edmonds a big box, etc. What would be the downside of that idea?
Perhaps losing some self-identity. We become beigeur, if you will. I'll tell you, this stuff just kind of goes in cycles. I was president of the chamber in the mid-'80s, and we were just kind of the small dog in town. Linwood was the big, massive chamber. And it was even bigger then because they merged that with the Everett Chamber and became the Economic Alliance. So I meet with the president. We had a nice lunch one day. Let's meet again. Okay, well, we met again. I couldn't tell exactly where he's going. And he finally says at the end of the second luncheon, don't you think it'd be a good idea if we merged our two chambers? I said, yeah, as long as we call it the Edmonds Chamber. That idea, I still paid for lunch, but it's a fair question. I don't think there's a dramatic downside, but the Linwood Chamber doesn't do the sort of business that the Edmonds Chamber does. Our Edmonds Chamber does a great job of sponsoring events. And like the Taste of Edmonds, that's their production. It's also the single business revenue generator that keeps them in business so they can run the tree lighting ceremony, so they can run the 4th of July. It's something that people complain about the Taste of Edmonds. But then when you explain to them is, well, would you not want to have this and this and this and this? Oh, I get it. Other question? Yep.
Of all the different projects that are going on in the city right now, whether it's Civic Park or the Crossing project, what's one of those projects that's like a favorite on your list, and why are you excited about it?
There's probably, I'll give you too many. Civic Field. I mean, if you don't understand, we have 8 acres in downtown Edmonds of something that we can now control because we bought the darn thing. That, I'm terribly interested in that. You know, you get everything from, the whole thing should be soccer fields to other really more specific uses. I'm excited about that. I'm committed to trying to solve this rail crossing that we've got, this problem that we've got in our town. We have 40 trains a day that come through now. That separates the waterfront from this area. We're projected by 2030, I think, to have 100 trains a day coming through town. It's not only stop, go, but we've got to figure out a way to move people around more freely. That's another one that is really of interest to me. I guess those are two fairly easy ones.
I really love that you're excited about the public bathrooms, because that leaves an opening for me to ask this question.
Well, actually, we're going to charge $4 a use, though. Does that?
So what I've noticed, I live on 3rd Avenue South, right next to the park, very close to the park, and what I've noticed is that this year, all summer, the smell from the treatment plant has been overwhelming. Do you know what's going on, and do you think we'll ever hook up to a regional system?
Well, we are hooked up to a regional system. We have some of the waste from other places that are processed here. There is the bigger one, though, obviously over at Woodinville area. I don't in the foreseeable future see that changing, simply because a facility like that is so expensive and such an economic challenge for a community that I think, now, I'm aware in hot weather that happens sometimes.
Is that, because I don't remember experiencing it before, but it could be where I live now. But I just thought it was like almost every day.
You know, you should always get a hold of Phil Williams, if it's really pronounced, and have them come down and take a whiff. But I'm serious. I mean, that's what you got to do, and then try and figure out what it is. Yes?
Probably you already seen this, but about talking about successful communities, what is their, I've seen in Puget Sound, there are major nonprofits, probably some churches that are big. What's your vision in terms of having a successful community with partnership with those nonprofits? What does that look like for you?
Well, the one thing, I don't know exactly what you had in mind, but one of the issues you've got with nonprofits is, I'll give you an easy example. We have a nonprofit across the street called the museum. We rent them that building for $1 a year. And they provide a great amenity for the community because it is the museum, it is a place that we can research history and find out more about the community. But it's a separate nonprofit. It's not part of the city. They're asking me in my budget this year, and I haven't done it, to give them X number of dollars because they are the accumulator of all of the memorabilia of the city of Edmonds. And so in their mind, well, let's ask the city. It's only fair that we store the stuff from the last 100 years. That sounds easy enough, but guess what? If I say yes to that nonprofit and somebody else comes at a nonprofit, the way that we can, I think, do a better job of getting to, I think, your question is that, for instance, we have put together the Diversity Commission this year. And we have really a wonderful group of people who have been appointed by the council and by me. And that's the way that we can get into some of these connections in the community, is work back with some groups like the Diversity Commission or like the Tree Board. She's walking this way, which means sit down. Thanks very much.